Okay, this is going to be programming assignment number 4, which is dealing with create, read, update, and delete on three different classes. And so I'm going to compile it first on linprog. So I give options for create, update, delete for each one, recipe and recipe step. So I'm going to just first create a recipe. Let me just title it. To and then I click done, I press done to stop or enter done to stop. And if I press P, I can print out what it just gave me and it prints correctly. If I want to add another step to index 0, I can do which recipe do you want to add to? I want to add to index 0 because that's what's right here. Header, I'll just type header. Made, description, made, and then done. And then if I press P, so yeah, it just added those onto the end, and it updated everything correctly. If I want to add another recipe, I just do capital C. Recipe title is, I'll just do title, description, header 3, I don't even know, description 3, done, press P, and then it adds it on the bottom. So it's a new recipe. Gives it ID +1, which is just 1. And then yeah, everything works. If I want to delete, let's say I want to delete recipe step 2 in the 0 index, which is egg. So I go ahead and do lowercase d because I'm deleting a recipe step. It prints out the recipe book again, tell me and ask me which one I want to delete, and I'm going to go ahead and delete. So you put a space between the recipe ID and the recipe step. So I want to get rid of 0 and then 1. And if I press P, it successfully got rid of header 2, as you can see. So if I want to delete a recipe, let's say I want to delete recipe at index 1, D, it's capital D, and then index 1, press P, and it got rid of the second one, which was this title. And then next I just have to do the updates. So if I do capital U, and the recipe I want to update is which recipe do you want to update? 0. And then new title, I'll give it say cheese, and then new description, dairy. If I press P, it successfully updated title to cheese and then description to dairy. And then if I want to update just the recipe step, header and description, I can do lowercase u. And then I do recipe step or recipe ID followed by recipe step with spaces. So let's say I want to do 0, 0, 0, do 0, 0. New header, I'll just do test. If I press P, it successfully updated it to header being test and then description being test. So everything works pretty fine, and if I do Q, it'll just quit the application. So now onto the explaining. So I have my 3 files here. So recipe step contains an operator overload for a recipe step. I have my private data variables. I have my default constructor, getters, setters, and this is going to update. Actually, I don't even need that. But yeah, it doesn't really matter because it's not really called. But and then I have my recipe class, which has another insertion operator overload, so I can see out a recipe class, and then that was the same thing as this, obviously. And then this one contains a pointer to recipe step, which is just called steps. And then I have my other variables right here, and I have my functions for adding a step, deleting a step, and then I have a reference to give me a step. So it takes in a specific recipe, and it's just going to give you the index of a recipe list, and it returns a recipe step. So basically, it's just returning a recipe step so that I can, print and do other things. And then I have getters for my variables. Moving on to recipe book, I have another insertion operator overload so that I can print out a recipe book. And then this one has a pointer to recipes, which basically what this means is recipe book has pointer to recipes, and then recipe also has pointer to recipe steps, so that recipes are kind of contained in a recipe book, if that makes sense. And then I have steps that are contained in a recipe. So yeah, I have my title, everything for recipe book, and I have an add recipe, delete recipe, and then a get recipe, which actually returns a pointer given the index, so that I can have another list um, like returned. It'll make more sense. I'll explain more in the definition, but that's pretty much those. And then for my recipe book.cpp, I have just a print menu function that prints all the options. This is my recipe step class. These are getters, which just return the value. I have my recipe step reference, like it gives me a recipe step based on the index that I put, um, so that I can access a recipe step. And then I have more setters, which just sets the ID. I have a default constructor setting sequence number to -1, ID to -1, and then header and description are just empty strings. And then I have a what's it called? Parameterized constructor for recipe step, which I don't even think I used, but we'll just leave it. Um, I have a recipe step. I have just some more setters to manipulate values or change values. Recipe class, I have more getters giving me private data members, setters that change the values. I have a default constructor, sets title and description to empty string values, and then size and capacity, and then it makes a new place in the heap um, with five characters, because or five spots, because that's what capacity is. I have another setter which sets title and description. And then I have my destructor, which just deallocates steps at the end of the application. Um, and then I have my copy constructor, which basically I copy in all the values, and then I make a new place in the heap for a new value. And then I simply just put all the data from the R value into the L value. Um, and then I have my operator, or I have my deep copy assignment operator overload, which copies in all the static variables, and then I deallocate. Um, then I make a new place in the heap so that I can put the old values or the R values into the L values, and then I return a this pointer. which is just a new list. Um, and then I have my add step. Basically, I just check to see if size is greater than or equal to capacity. And then if size is greater, then I want to make a new place in the heap that is 5 more than capacity. Copy everything in from the old array into the new array, which is just temp. And then I deallocate steps, and then I set steps equal to what we just did in the for loop. And then I make capacity plus equals 5 because this doesn't change the actual value. It's just giving me a number that's more than 5 more than capacity. So updating capacity value. And then if size is not, regardless of if size is greater than or equal to capacity or not, it's going to run here. So I have my size increasing by 1, and then I set the last value of steps, which is just the list, to a setter, which just sets the recipe step to the header that we passed in, header and description that we passed in. And then I believe this was sequence number. So this changes the sequence number to size because let's say we have 3 elements in an array, like we want the third one to be 3, if that makes sense. So like it's just the number of recipe steps. And then size minus 1, this was ID, so I'm assigning it the ID, which is just the index. So that's going to be just size minus 1. And then I have an update step, which basically just, I don't think I use this anyway, but it just changes these values, which are the object that we're currently scoped to the parameters. Um, I was doing a lot of like fiddling around, just trying to make like update functions or different functions that I just never ended up using. So yeah. And then I have a delete step, which basically just takes in an ID and it goes from that ID to size. Um, Actually, I think it should be size minus 1. It still works, but it should be size minus 1 because I don't want to walk off the array because this is doing I plus 1. I did it in the other one, but I forgot to change this one. But it doesn't give me a segfault, so I have size minus 1 now. And so what I do is I put the one that's next in the array, I shift it over to the left. So, and then I also change the ID and the sequence number so that they match up. Um, so like for example, if I'm doing 0, 1, 2, 3, and I get rid of 2, I don't want it to be 0, 1, 3. So I have to make that 3, since it's greater than 2, I have to make that 3 equal to 2. So it can be 0, 1, 2. Um, and then I decrement size because the list is now one size less. And then I have my recipe book function, some getters giving me private variables. My recipe book, I initialize the title to JLent's recipe book. Size equals 0, capacity equals 5, and then it makes a new place in the heap with 5 elements. So recipe star recipe book. I initially had this as a reference return, but it wasn't working for some reason when I was trying to do the update. So I changed it to a pointer. It returns a pointer. And I believe that pointer is pointing to a recipe step, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, so it returns recipes at the index that we give, um, because recipe contains recipe steps. So and then I have my destructor, which deallocates at the end of the application or whatever. And then I have a copy constructor, same thing as the last one, just copying in the static data, making a new place in the heap, and then copying the stuff from the R value into the L value. And then I have my insertion operator overloads. So this one's for recipe book. I can simply just, because I have dependency on other classes, so I just do r.recipes, which calls the recipe insertion operator overload, and then r.steps calls the steps operator overload. So those all work fine, and I'm returning O each time because it's a reference to OStream. And then I have another assignment operator overload, which copies in the static stuff, deallocates, and then makes a new place in the heap for something for the data that we pass in. Then it returns a list. And then I have my add recipe function, which is very similar to the last one, which basically if size is greater than capacity, it's going to make 5 new places in the heap. Um, so let's say size became 6, or let's say size became 5 because 5 is equal to 5. It's going to do 5 plus 5, which is 10. So it's going to make 10 places in the heap and then copy in all the data and then um, increments capacity by 5, increments size, and then it puts the recipe object that we pass in as size minus 1, which is just the last element. And then it also sets the ID to size minus 1. Lastly, I have my delete recipe, super similar to the other recipe. It literally is the exact same thing. Oh, see, and I have my size minus 1 right here, so I just forgot to do it in the other one, but it didn't segfault, so, and now it won't segfault if you try to test it again. Um, yeah, basically just going from ID, which is what we pass in, to delete, to size minus 1 because we don't want to walk off the array. And then it shifts everything to the left, decrements the ID, and then decrements size. So going to the main function, I have a bunch of variables here, recipe book made using the default constructor. I have my print menu function, and then I'll explain this in a second, but cin, I get the value of the choice that they want to make using the print menu function. And then while choice is not equal to Q, this is basically just making a loop until they want to quit. So big C is they want to create a new recipe. So I did the default constructor for recipe, I get the data, and then I run a loop. So I made it to where if they want to make a new recipe, they have to make recipe steps to go inside of that recipe. So I do a while loop until they quit they until header is done, which they type in. So it keeps adding those steps to recipe, which is the object that we created. So it keeps adding those steps to recipe, and then once they press or type in done, it's going to set recipe. I could have done this above, but it doesn't really matter. So I set recipe to the title and description that they put in, and then I go ahead and add that recipe that I just created, which contains all the recipe steps, to the recipe book. And then I make first choice equal to false because I don't want them to be able to basically like they have to create a recipe first. Like they can't update a recipe if there's no recipes. So I made a first choice equals false. Um, so yeah, I just made a boolean, and then the other booleans check to see, or the other L or if statements check if first choice equals false. Um, and if it does, then that means that it has gone through here. So print menu, they get another choice. If they do P, basically it's self-explanatory, just prints the recipe book. I do see out the title first, gives them another option. Delete, this is big delete, which is deleting a recipe, and it asks them which recipe they want to delete. Then I do some bounds checking just to make sure I don't get any seg faults because I don't want them to be able to try to access something that doesn't exist. So yeah, I have that, and then um, deleting a what's it called? Deleting a recipe step. It just asks them what they want to delete, and it gives them they have to type in two things, which is recipe choice followed by recipe choice step choice. And then I make a pointer that points to the actual recipe that they want, and then it calls the delete step. Um, and yeah, this was the only way I could do it to where the lowercase u would work. For some reason, it wouldn't work. The setter wouldn't work unless I did this way, which is returning a pointer. Um, and then little c is adding another recipe step to an existing recipe. So I just get in the data. Um, I run a for loop or a while loop so that they can keep entering recipe steps if they want. Um, adds the step to the pointer, and then yeah. So yeah, yeah. So this is just adding the step to the recipe. Um, and then I have uppercase U, which manipulate or updates a recipe. So for my update, I did it to where they have to update a title and a description. And then I print the recipe book so that they can get they have their options or whatever, which one they want to update, and then they type it in, and then it gets the step using the pointer, and then it updates using the what's it called the this thing which dereferences and then uses the dot operator. Um, and then yeah, same thing here pretty much. It's just it's updating a recipe step instead of a recipe. So it gets the data and then updates the choice or updates the step header and description. So that's pretty much it. This is just if, oh, so it goes here, and if first choice is equal to true, that means they haven't gone through and created a recipe yet. So I just tell them to create a recipe first, and then if not, then they enter it incorrect input, and then I print menu, give them another choice, and then at the end, when they press Q to quit the application, it just prints the book. So yeah, my brain is pretty fried. Thank you for listening, and yeah.